Hidden Figures is a film that not only tells an incredible true story, but also displays some pretty amazing cinematography and directing. Figures plays Figures brings to light the untold story of three brilliant African American women working at NASA during the space race with Russia. Their contributions helped send the first American astronaut, John Glenn, into orbit and played a crucial role in ultimately winning the space race. As the title alludes to, their achievements were largely overlooked and hidden for decades. Today we'll explore how, guided by director John Melfi's direction, the cinematographer Mandy Walker enhances our understanding of these remarkable women through the techniques and visual elements she used to make a powerful and engaging film. This is a picture from a panel that some of the cast and crew did for NASA for Hidden Figures. We have the director Todd Melfi in the hat, and to his right, Octavia Spencer, who plays Dorothy Vaughn, a mathematician and the first Black woman to be promoted to a supervisory role at NASA. She led a team of women mathematicians. Taraji P. Henson, who plays Katherine Henson, whose calculations ensured the safety and precision of John Glenn's orbit around the Earth, and later worked on other important NASA missions and has a wing named after her. Next is Janelle Monáe. She played Mary Jackson, the first Black woman to become an aerospace engineer. She was also a passionate advocate for increasing opportunities for women and minorities in engineering. Next, we have the producer Pharrell Williams and Bill Berry, a consultant for the movie and chief historian at NASA. Theodore Melfi saw directing Hidden Figures as an opportunity to honor the overlooked contributions of African American women in science and engineering. He felt a personal connection to the story, which deeply influenced his approach. His commitment to authenticity ensured their stories were told with the dignity they deserved. His dedication to this project not only shaped his directing style, but also highlighted the importance of diversity and representation both on and off the screen. There's a quote from Hannah Levin from an interview she did with him. Melfi is one of the few directors I've talked to who actively works to have an inclusive set with diverse collaborators, both in front of the camera and behind it. And then a quote from Melfi himself when he dropped out as a contender to direct Spider-Man to direct this film instead. When they asked him why, he said, "I have two daughters, and I said to myself, there's nothing more valuable for my life than to do the story justice." And just for a little more context, this movie was based on a book by the same name, written by the founder of the Human Computer Project, Margot Lee Shetterly. Her project helps recover the names and stories of forgotten female engineers, mathematicians, and scientists of the mid-1900s. And according to her bio page on her website, she's also a native of Virginia, where this film is set. Finally, we have our cinematographer, whose work is the focus of this presentation. This is Mandy Walker, one of the few female cinematographers in the business. She's an award winner, and like the director, Theodore, she feels a strong connection to the story and characters in the movie because of her status in a male-dominated industry. One quote from her about the making of the movie included that she used celluloid film stock instead of digital to give it more authenticity. So we have both her and the director's commitment to authenticity really driving the making of Hidden Figures into an accurate historical drama that makes you feel like you're really watching these women's lives. Another nod to the authenticity and heroes behind the true story of the movie. Here we have the actors on stage with the real Catherine at an award ceremony, which you can see there's many nominations for this movie as well. So what is cinematography? Basically, it's the film's look and feel. It's achieved by things such as selecting camera angles and lighting, to choosing lenses and framing shots. They're all used to enhance and tell a story. One technique that Mandy Walker uses often in Hidden Figures is close-up. She uses it to both focus on specific characters and important visual clues from inanimate objects that she wants to emphasize. For instance, there's close-ups of character faces, such as Katherine Johnson's intense expressions during critical moments that highlight her personal struggles and triumphs, drawing the audience into her internal experiences. At the church picnic, we see a long close-up of the food, which helps create a sense of community and personal connection, grounds the characters' professional lives in their personal, everyday experiences. And there's also the moment where Al hands Catherine the chalk in the first men's only meeting that she's allowed to go into, where he's asked a question that only she can answer. So essentially, it's giving up the reins to her to take over. There's also a crucial shot up of her circling the equation, the solution to the equation that re-verifies the re-entry point for John Glenn that the IBM gets wrong. This shot adds a tactile human element in contrast to the technological element and emphasizes the importance of her specific role in the success of the mission. We also see close-ups of the reports Catherine writes on her typewriter and who's getting credit for them. In the final close-up of one of these reports, it has both their names on it, and she's not reprimanded for this. The use of lighting also helps deepen emotions and symbolism. The use of dark windowless rooms, like the library, contrasting with Dorothy with her book immediately after, framed by a large bright bus window. When Catherine comes up with a solution and she's framed under a bright light bulb, followed by the moment the door closes in Catherine's face after she hand delivers her crucial calculations to the control room, and the screen becomes very dark, echoing her disappointment, which is then followed by Al opening the door back up to her, to the brightly lit control room, inviting her in. So there's a lot of use of light to convey meaning. Also, in comparison from the East and the West Wing, where one is brightly lit, tall, full of windows, like very, very bright, almost whitewashing light, and then the dim lighting, windowless, the West Wing. Also, in the hallway, there's a lot of use of light to convey meaning. The hallway is a frequent motif in the film. The movement of the camera also works to convey meaning. There are times when the camera pans in or out on a subject, and there are times when the subject moves towards the camera of their own will. These two methods highlight the events which are subject to circumstance and the ones where the characters push forward and break barriers themselves. I think these two clips, the first clip is an example of the character moving their story forward themselves, and then the last one is actually the opposite of this other technique that's used often. It's a pan out, where you see the words on the wall kind of in a reading scroll, where she finally breaks the barrier into the world of NASA. So the first one, the camera stays still for. So, and that one, the camera is still, she moves towards it. This one, she's also still, and the camera moves, but it's in that opposite direction, and the focus is on these words. Wow. Framing her in that bright light inside. She's not an outsider anymore. She's part of the space test group. There's also this wide angle pan in of the car for when they show her as an adult for the first time and she's getting pulled over with the sheriff. And there's also these other intimate moments where the camera kind of pans back to make you feel like an outsider and then moves in to let you in on these intimate moments in their lives. Mandy's framing techniques are also symbolic and meaningful. She uses perspective and scale to make characters visually smaller when they're powerless. She uses blurring and close shots to convey solitariness to the character, even when they're surrounded by other people or in an environment that would be considered inclusive, like sitting with a class. These shots convey the separation that still exists. So we have these top ones where she's kind of powerless, being interrogated, being stuck late in the office doing all this work, but for not the same pay and unable to use the bathroom. And then we have like the two women in these white men world that they're in it, they're in the world, they've been allowed into it, but they're not really part of it. Which brings us to the Mandy's use of emphasizing the outsider nature of the people in the film, showing a non-point of view shot of the black female computers as they're watching the Friendship 7 orbit on a TV inside of the NASA compound. Kind of drives home this point that they're almost as much of an outsider as the civilians who are watching at home or through this window looking in at the news broadcasts. We're also made to feel as outsiders, as I said before, being let in on these intimate moments in the main characters' lives through the zooming in and zooming out, zooming in. There's also a lot of outsider shots of Al's office and from Al's office. That glass wall where he's looking out on the employees or they're looking up at him that reinforce not necessarily his seclusion, but his independent nature. So his is for a little bit of a different reason that I will get into through the use of motif. So in the cinematography in Hidden Figures also relies heavily on the use of motifs, which are repeated use of specific sets, scenes, and shots. They're patterns that reinforce the theme of the film, and the symbolic significance is established through this repetition. The first motif that I wanted to talk about is the glass wall in Al's office. From this previous slide, Al is kept separate and solitary, like the women we see in the film, like the three women, but this is by choice. He's not a hidden figure. He's a very visible figure. He's literally on display, and actually found an explanation of the symbolism of the glass-walled office that explains why this motif is probably seen so often in this film. It says that glass walls are different types of barriers that isolate women and people of color by holding them back in jobs that don't lead to executive advancement, block lateral moves that lead to promotions, or limit the ability to perform effectively in a role, which is just central theme of this whole movie and story. Another motif is the transitional space of the hallway. It represents the path between the two worlds. And throughout the film, the women are seen traveling through it alone, in striking contrast to how often they're shown together otherwise. The hallway also serves as a visual metaphor for the obstacles and challenges the women navigate as they strive to break through the societal barriers and achieve recognition. But then we'll see, like, once one of them breaks through, like actually breaks through, she's promoted. Gloria is promoted to that supervisory role, and she brings everyone else with her. And there's actually a cool parallel shot of those first astronauts going down for the Apollo mission as pioneers, and then these women coming down this same hallway shot as pioneers. This is a really important scene of the hallway where the two worlds collide. We have Al in the middle, literally breaking the barrier between the two worlds and the two crowds of white and black employees who are standing on opposite sides of this colored restroom. And this is just another example reinforcing independent nature. Another motif is the long way to go that the characters have to achieve success and the separation that still exists between their worlds, even once they're quote unquote accepted. This journey is shown over and over again, undertaken by Catherine and then finally by a messenger, and they to close that gap together when he's well, not he, they're all humbled and have to go across that divide to bring her back. So this first one is one that we see over and over where she has to leave the office, go down the hallway, go across the parking lot, go through all this rigmarole just to use the restroom. So she's been accepted into this world like as this position, but she's not really part of it. And this is that distance that still remains between actually being a part of that world. It's a big distance. And we see this a lot in the movie, the same shot. Next one is another one where they're kind of humbled. They realize they need her. They have to get rid of that divide. Have to really make her part of their team in order to be successful. And actually, I feel like when watching it, like the journey that he took was the longest one that they show. Another motif we see here is a visual representation of a common metaphor in the use of the ceiling. So we have low ceilings, high ceilings, raising the ceiling through the use of framing and perspective. These barriers to success are gradually lifted throughout the film, and angles and perspectives in the film incorporate that. There's also when they're showing the east versus the west wing is always in this straight on, like you can't even see the ceiling in such a low shot, versus these really like almost like helicopter views when we're in the east wing. And then there's also this use of these panning up shots for small victories of progress and the literal raising of the ceiling when they come out of the hallway and they're going into the IBM lab. Which brings us to the motif behind the IBM room, which is a metaphor for the loss of human jobs to machines, and then this ultimate melding of the two together by Gloria. So it's this stark white, empty room, computers taking these jobs. I couldn't find a shot of just the room by itself, but in the beginning they show it with nobody in it, just this white empty room. And then there's this kind of middle shot where Gloria's in here and it's still empty. It's just her. She's starting to add this human element in. Dorothy, sorry, not Gloria. And then let's see. And then after she kind of breaks that barrier, there's this addition of the human element in order to make it work. And it's full of people and color. Yeah. This is that. Them coming down the hallway with the low ceiling spot from earlier. They break outside. They go into that east wing, do that whole long journey that they've been doing. Except for this time, they actually break through into the east wing. They're all together. And there's this like high ceiling shot where they go in and everyone's inside of this room together now. As stated before, the motif of solidarity and segregation is visually repeated throughout the movie, showing the women together in solidarity or alone in the company of white men, or sometimes white women. There's the triumphant moment where Gloria breaks through the literal and metaphorical low ceiling that Black females were under and is promoted to supervisor and takes her whole team with her down the hallway and into the IBM room. All these beginning shots of all the women together in a crowd of white people. So there's this whole theme of solidarity. These women are being segregated and they're trying to break through, but they want to do it together. There's some little bullet points about that. Also, like, in the West Wing, it always shows them all sitting communally. It's one big long desk. Also, probably because they didn't have funding, but it also feeds into that communal perspective. And in the East Wing, it's all these separate desks in this long, far out shot, as opposed to this close up shot. That's a little bit more communal. We also have use of angles that's kind of similar to the ceiling motif. That conveys emotion and aspiration, moments of the women metaphorically aiming for the stars, and these moments of small victory that are often seen through an upward angle. So kind of aiming for the stars, breaking the ceilings. When I was in the hallway, this is also like an upshot. to draw comparisons and highlight double standards. We see a lot of this use of parallel shots. For example, there's this scene where there's a shot of Catherine on the ladder doing these crazy calculations, and she's alone, and it quickly switches to this white male janitor on a ladder who's being assisted by several other white men and just doing this simple job of hanging a sign. And then there's many shots of the white and colored bathrooms. They're similarly shot, as well as shots of the East and West Wing at NASA, and the moment where Catherine's interrogated for solving the equation versus the moment Al's interrogated at the Pentagon in a real actual interrogation. Two scenes that mirror each other that I really like, that show Catherine as still the same person she's always been, but highlights how far she's come, happen in the beginning and then towards the end of the movie. There's that same chalk scene, the circling of the equation. It's repeated when she's older too. That's that first one, and then we have this next one that parallels it. That first meeting where she's allowed in. That moment where he can't answer this question. He needs her. He has to give over the reins. He hands over the chalk so she can show what she can do, just like in that beginning shot. Okay, so that was my last motif. Besides this use of historical footage that's interspersed throughout the film, kind of gets a little heavier towards the launch and the orbit for John Glenn. It adds to the realism, kind of brings you out of the like quote unquote story to remind you that it's not just a story, it's history. So it's part of that authenticity that the director and the cinematographer are going for, and really kind of almost takes you out of it for a second to remind you that you're not just watching a movie. So just to wrap it back up, the director and cinematographers, they really believe in the importance of subject matter that comes across in the movie through the cinematography, the directing, used to reinforce themes, the symbolic meaning of angles, framing, lighting, and the motifs, and the historical footage for perspective and realism. Thank you.